Welcome to Gravelized, everybody. I'm your host, John Vargas. Thank you for listening in and taking your time to check out the Gravelized podcast. Our mission and goal is to consistently understand the epidemic of mental health disorders, mental health conditions, suicide, and reversing all these things within the first responder community. So, my goal right here is to be a mirror to you guys because I come on here and try to be as vulnerable as I can to try to figure out a solution or many solutions to what we're dealing with right now. I want to start off by having our disclaimer out. Everything we say and do does not reflect the views or opinions of the City of Los Angeles Fire Department. And two more things. I am offering something called the Inside and Out program. This program is designed to help you inhabit your power in your life and to get past blocks, biological, spiritual, emotional, mental. I take this full approach. So if you would like to work with me, I'm doing a 90-day program. I only have a couple spots left. And I want people to understand that this is a more advanced program to help you unravel your belief systems, to unravel your blocks, to unravel your wounds that you may carry that has issues in your work life, in your relationships as a parent, as a husband or wife. So reach out to the Grab Lives Instagram for that. I also am endorsing the 343 Fund program, a nonprofit for a fallen FDNY firefighter. This is a nonprofit to help firefighters find healing in a holistic way. And if you apply for it, you could possibly go and do Ibogaine to help reverse PTSD, brain trauma, and completely reframe the cerebral cortex of the brain and the limbic brain. And people get their lives back after doing this medicine. So if you're interested, go to the 343fund.org and apply. And if you're interested in helping a first responder, you can also donate. All the stuff is on their website if you check it out. Today, I did a fascinating episode with a guy named Jason Latas. Super cool dude. And we had such a cool conversation. He's a guy who he studies the solar frequencies that are impacting the planet. And there's been some really controversial information about, is this affecting human biology? Is it affecting human emotions? I think it's really fascinating. I've noticed there's been a trend within my own self, like emotionally and physically across the board with the sun's solar activity, the solar wind, the solar flares. On the Space Weather Report, you check this stuff out, it actually starts to make sense. And so this conversation's really complex, and I hope we broke it down for everyone to understand. This was the first remote episode that we've had. So I am looking to do more innovative things with the podcast, but please check out this episode. Really fascinating, and be open to what Jason has to say. Thank you so much, and I love you guys. Take care.
It's time for Grab Lives.
All right, everyone. So Jason, thank you for being the first remote streaming podcast episode. So
Nice.
Congratulations. And I'm honored to speak with you. I love your shirt, dude. Let that shit go.
Thank you.
Is that
That's
your
our
brand?
mantra. Yeah, exactly. If more people
Cool,
could
man.
do this, can you imagine the world we would have if everybody just got over it and got along? You know?
Right, dude. I totally believe in that. So I'm really excited about this episode because I followed you for a very long time. And I've been very intrigued. And even when I was telling my fiance about doing this episode, she was like really excited to hear about what you have to say about the conversation we're going to have. And
Nice.
I think one of the biggest things is your wavelength of the things you know is very advanced. And I loved how as I started to educate myself on some of these esoteric things, you really came in and like made things simple, but also at the same time had extra wisdom in accordance with like how things are kind of integrating on this planet.
Nice. I like how you put that. Thank you.
So I would like to start talking about solar flares. And one of the biggest things with solar flares that I came across was I started to experience some of these really strange physical symptoms. And when I started to experience them, it was like a wide range of things. Either I would be extremely tired, or I would feel palpitations, or
Yeah.
I would feel like anxiety, or I would feel like repressed emotions just coming to the
Yes.
surface just across the board. It was really bizarre. And there was nothing that was like there was nothing I could put like words to it, but I'm very sensitive in the sense where I can sense things. And I would talk to my fiance about it, and we would have discussions like, hey, what the hell's going on? And then when the solar flares started to come up on I guess my awareness, it started to
Yeah.
make more sense. So if you don't mind breaking down solar flares and their impact on our physical vessel, this physical vehicle we drive, and also in even accordance with like this hive consciousness we are activating right now.
Yeah, yeah. I like how you phrase that. I need to preface this with just a few things that'll help your viewers understand a little bit better. I've been able to see energy since I was a child. And first accidentally astral traveled out of my body as a teenager.
For sure.
So my brain formed different than your average human. Everybody talks about the matrix, but when you can literally see it and you can see the glitches in reality and you can see energy, everything looks radically different.
Mm,
So I've done my best to really mix that with the science and physics because I've been coaching for 30 years and I can't just come out and start talking energy to people. I
mm,
can now, but for years, I made a point to really touch into the science and physics so you guys could understand it a little bit better. The solar flares, it's interesting. I've had a love affair with the sun for over 20 years. I lived in Maui for 15 years. I used to sun gaze. I learned a lot from the kapuna and kupuna in Maui. And just the power of the sun, really, we wouldn't be here without it, right? And we're
mm,
just in that Goldilocks arena. We're just close enough, yet not too far away that we're not too hot or not too cold. And the sun does regulate. Everybody, Schumann resonance is trending now. Also, everyone's talking about that. It's always interesting to see what's trending. But the sun does have a major effect on that, not just community consciousness. And like I said, I've been sun gazing for about 20 years and I've been observing the sun. And I'll go back to kind of mid to late 2023. My little nerd thing on social media was when there was a large solar flare, usually an X class or above, because they're fairly rare. I would announce it on social media. The sun goes through 11-year cycles, 11-ish, right? And at some point during that cycle, it goes into what's called solar max, where the frequencies increase, the solar flares, coronal mass ejections, and all of that really increase. We appear to be kind of tapering out of solar max right now,
mm.
but in 2023, like I said, a couple times a year. We'd have an X class flare, really rare. And I'd make a post and say, hey, did anybody feel this last night? And, people that were empaths or followers of mine that were sensitive to energy would reach back out. And it was just something fun I did. But towards getting into October and November of 23, all of a sudden I'm making another post and then another post. And I'm like, oh shit. Okay, what's going on here? And it literally just went from a few X class flares to just taking off. And we went through 2 years, or over a year and a half, pardon me, of intense solar max. And there's a couple different things I'd get into. There's solar flares, right? There's coronal mass ejections, and these are very different. You were asking me about solar flares, and that was one of the first things we noticed when the sun fired up. And those have a tendency to affect your stress levels, to affect your central nervous system. But it happened in a really interesting way because I have a global audience that reaches out to me, and people started reaching out from around the world with really similar symptoms. And I noticed in the beginning, it was more of, like I said, and we're going back to, late 2023, people were just like, what's going on? I feel different. There's just something different. But then within a few months of really, really heavy flare activity, I started noticing, and it's really similar to a hyperactive central nervous system,
Mm.
repressed and suppressed emotions coming up in people. And this was happening all over the world. It started with suppressed emotions, which are just the emotions that we suppress every day, right? That clog up our throat chakra. We don't say what we want to our boss, to our friends, to other people because we want to hold the peace, but we hold that in our bodies. A lot of this started coming up, and about 6 months in, people started getting old childhood experiences and repressed deep emotions coming. It's almost like the sun was saying, we're going to start you guys slow, right? It's time for humanity to level up a little bit, and then we're going to amp it up. And as it did, the symptoms, like you explained, about 6 months in, started getting really heavy. And when you get suppressed emotions are one thing, but when you get the repressed, the deep childhood traumas and life traumas, those start to come up. And we've forgotten those. As a child, as your brain developed, you didn't have a frontal lobe. So when you experienced trauma, you shoved it down deep and dark, right? You just wanted to forget about it because you didn't have the ability to discern, to reason, or any of that. You didn't know what to do with it. So you packed it down tight. That's the stuff that's coming up. When it comes up, we don't recognize it because we've stuffed it so deep as a child, we've forgotten those experiences. But our central nervous system and our cellular structure recognizes it. So what it started doing is that as it came up, it was unrecognizable, but it caused what I call a cellular, not I call, but what's called a cellular dissonance in your system. Your mind didn't remember it, but your cellular structure did. And it created this dissonance in your system, which was causing stress-like symptoms, heart palpitations, and all those things. So I know that was a really long answer, but I wanted to preface it with all those things because
Yeah.
it's not like all of a sudden, boom, it's happening. You know, it's been a process. And there you go. I'll leave the mic open to you for a minute so I don't take all your time.
No, no, dude, this is exactly what you're here for. You're giving just a general basic understanding. So what I like to do is, like, when I have someone explaining some really complex, like, esoteric knowledge,
Yeah.
some of my audience are just like these firefighters who are just like barely understanding like
Yes.
what an emotion is.
Yeah. Yes. Well, you have
Yeah.
to. You also, in your line of work, it's beautiful. Thank you for doing what you do. You have to repress. I was explaining to you, I think last week, I had an adventure company in Maui, and I took the first responder training, right? I couldn't go any further than that
Yeah.
because I was feeling it so strongly in my system. So you have to suppress certain emotions so that you can stay cognizant while you're treating other people. So yeah, I totally hear what you're saying. A lot of that is is survival too.
Yeah, I think it's a compartmentalization.
That's well
But I
said.
think I would like to go back to what you were talking about with sun gazing, because I know I've studied just indigenous cultures for a very long
Yes.
time, like maybe over the last like 20 years. I've been so fascinated by these indigenous people because to me it seemed like they were so connected. And when I would connect to my own indigenous lineage, I felt like I would just know things in regards to what they were saying, and
Yes.
the way that they saw nature as teachers was really fascinating to me, in the sense like they not only do they see uh that everything has a consciousness, but everything has an intelligence, which I
Yes.
think is very valid to understand, and something that we're missing on this evolutionary state that humanity's on embarking upon. But I think with the sun gazing was these ancient sages and seers in India would actually use sun gazing as a practice. And so
Yeah.
what they would do is they would stare at the sun, and what they would say is that the sun would open up their particles in their body, and they would open up like different energy centers in their body, and they were able to inhabit these skills and these I would say these superpowers just by using the sun. And I know other ancient indigenous cultures also worship the sun because they
Yeah.
saw it as the great father of what some indigenous cultures
Yeah.
had called it, from like the Native Americans to the Aboriginals to across the board, right?
Yeah.
But and also to piggyback off kind of what we were talking about with just like the basic emotional suppression is like we use some of these emotional suppressions in order to use them as survival skills. So we will
Yeah.
naturally compartmentalize things, in order for things to naturally evolve at a developmental stage within childhood and things like that. And so it's only normal to suppress things.
Yeah.
And even going back to what some of these indigenous cultures had been talking about for a very long time was that humanity was under a quarantine. And then under that quarantine was that we were essentially under this amnesia state on
Yeah.
which humanity has been in place with, where we forgot who we truly
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
And I think what's happening is there's this breaking open of the old molds that have been holding us down. And what some of these indigenous cultures had predicted was that they're after this quarantine, some say 26,000 years, some say
Yeah.
17,000 years, was that it's going to end. And after that ends, now we have humanity going through this awakening process. And so when that happens, the systems that are in place, government systems, systems of separation and distortion, they will all crumble because they cannot exist under this new frequency after this awakening begins. So a good example would be like the Kali Yuga age has definitely just ended back in March
Yeah.
of this year.
Yeah.
So what I find really fascinating is that this is happening. It's been predicted by these sages, these seers, these wisdom keepers of this planet. And so one of the things that's really remarkable is the sun activity, right? So
Yeah.
I know you talked about an X class solar flare, right? So if you don't mind breaking down, because there's different types of levels of what those are. And X class
Yeah.
is something where you'll experience those anxieties or whatever, right? So if you
Yeah.
don't mind breaking down like the simplicity of what the solar flare is, how they're categorized, and what
Yeah.
a coronal hole is, because I've always been kind of confused of what a coronal hole is. If you don't mind breaking
Yeah.
that down.
Nice. There's a lot to unpack. I love everything you said. Seriously, I was just I was hanging on every word. Do you want me to start with that and go into sun gazing, or how do you want me to package this for you?
Let's just break down the classes, and then the coronal
Okay.
holes, and then go into the sun gazing.
Okay. So the sun has, well, today, 12 sunspots on the sun. And these are just active areas on the sun that they have what's called beta gamma or beta gamma delta configurations, which is the electromagnetic field or active field that they're encompassing. And these are
Mhm.
just spots that are primed to blow, right? Imagine like a bunch of rubber bands wound up, right? Electromagnetic fields, and they'll just kind of pop loose every now and then with a little activity, kind of so they don't get too explosive. And that's normal, what's called B and C class flares. Today we only had C class flares. Those are the small ones. You rarely ever hear anyone reporting about C class flares unless it's the
Mhm.
only thing happening on the sun. When there's larger flares, as we get into an M class flare, that's that next level that you start to hear about, right? Because it's more
Mhm.
powerful. And then the most powerful is an X class flare. And those are the big ones. Those are the ones that wake you up at night or just kind of make you go, whoa, what just happened? You know, especially if you're sensitive to energy, there can be like a little glitch in the matrix and you'll feel it. Those are big blasts really of radiation coming off the sun. Those only take about 2 hours to reach Earth because they're just a quick boom, a radioactive flash. And that's where we might feel it, but there's not a ton of after effects, right? It's like someone just kind of shocking you once, right? And you have a little bit of effect when it happens, and then it tapers away. The larger, or how can I say, the more dense feelings that we're feeling now on the emotional side and all these other things, the flares can kind of like bring up an emotion, bring something up for you, right? And I think that's why this solar max, and I'm going to say why, started that way, because it was slowly waking up humanity. You know what I mean? It was
Mhm.
just like a little bit of a shock here and there, saying, okay, it's time to wake up. It's time to wake up. And it started getting stronger and stronger and stronger, and people starting having deeper and deeper emotions coming to the surface. Now, those are the flares. When we get to the coronal hole, you'll hear some people, social media is full of fear-based posts. I recommend you
Right.
don't listen to those. And they're usually saying, oh my God, there's a hole in the sun, and all of these different things to tag your attention. All a coronal hole is an opening in the sun's atmosphere. And that area actually becomes a little bit cooler, if you can even imagine the word cool on the sun. But it's an opening in the atmosphere, and you'll see it. If you look at my post today, there's one right in the middle of the sun, and it's a dark region. There's certain areas, if they're kind of too far north, they don't affect the Earth as much. It's down here south of the equatorial separation of the sun that tends to affect the Earth a little bit more. And those just allow, let me back up really quick. If there's a large X-class flare, M or X-class, sometimes on the rebound, it'll send what's called a coronal mass ejection. That's the one I didn't talk about. And that's when you get the flare and then a rebound effect, which will send a kind of a blob of plasma into space, right?
Mm.
And that takes maybe 2 to 3 days to reach Earth. And that's where we get heavily charged particles interacting with the atoms in our atmosphere. And that's where we get the aurora borealis, right? That, I know is on my bucket list, but that's where we'll see the aurora borealis is when we get heavily charged particles. Those take 2 or 3 days to get here, and they might last 24 hours, right, before they fade away. And so the next one is the coronal holes I was just talking about. That's an opening. So instead of just a chunk of plasma heading our way, that's just an opening that just lets a river, literally like a wind stream of heavily charged particles to flow towards Earth. And if that coronal hole is in a geoeffective position, it takes still 2 to 3 days to reach us. But once it does reach us, it's not just a blurb like a coronal mass ejection. It's a steady flow. And this is the stuff that we've had a lot of over the past 6 months. And man, these heavily charged particles, like heavy protons, they pass right through your body like an X-ray. And they reconfigure your DNA on the way through. And that's what's happening right now. It's like it's recalibrating the human structure, but it also really messes with your circadian rhythms. Since it's a longer lasting, not just a quick X-ray flash, that longer lasting, really like a proton bath, you feel whole body pain, inflammation, old injuries are going to start coming to the surface, things like that. And that's what a lot of people have been feeling for the past 6 months. And what you may be feeling too, are a lot of your firefighters, right? Old football injury that came back out of nowhere. Well, no, you're being bathed in these heavily charged particles. The one thing they really do is they mix up your circadian rhythms. So there's a lot of people right now that can't sleep at night and they don't know why. And humans already, they screw up their circadian rhythms. We were designed really to like rise with the sun, right? I won't get into, what we should eat, but we rise, we eat, we get sunlight. We're outside, we're chopping wood, carrying water. We're not inside with fake lighting, right? And other things. Our eyes are designed to feel and read the frequencies of the sun. And in the morning, there's certain light rays, right? And the crystals in our retina pick up that frequency and transfer it through a neural pathway to our pineal gland. And our pineal gland is in charge of it, has similar crystals, and it creates a piezoelectric effect and it activates it. That then it creates the hormones we need for the day. Well, those are different in the morning. And then at noon or midday, we're getting heavy, strong blue light, right? That's why it's not good to look at your screen at night, because that's a heavy blue light. It'll wake you up. It's designed to give you energy during the day. And then as it tapers, right, into the evening, we start producing melatonin. Our body starts getting ready for rest. And like I said, most humans have already screwed up this pattern just from, working indoors, living indoors, and staying up all night. But the sun right now is really mixing it up, because that's one of the things that these heavily charged particles will do. So the best thing I always recommend for people right now is to hydrate, really hydrate, put a pinch of sea salt in your water. And before bed, I put a little tiny pinch of sea salt on my tongue to get the minerals in our body that we need, the hydration. But in the morning, the most important thing you can do, drink water, go barefoot on the earth, right? That ties you back into the earth and circadian rhythms, because there's a different frequency on earth in the morning too. And get some sunlight in your eyes. It doesn't mean you need to stare at the sun, just looking at the blue sky. And your body is designed to read these different frequencies throughout the day to regulate your circadian rhythms. So I hope I didn't go too deep into that.
No, that's exactly what
And
I wanted.
next, I can go into sun gazing next if you didn't have any other questions from that.
No, that was perfect. I think the only thing that I don't think we touched on was solar winds, because
Okay, yeah,
that was
good.
one of the things that uh, as I was started to kind of watch the space weather reports and
Yeah,
know my internal state and kind of mend what's kind of going on, I noticed solar
yeah,
winds were extremely erratic, and they would continue for days on end,
yeah,
and those are the ones where I really felt some bouts of anxiety, palpitations,
yeah,
along. So that one, when that KP index of a solar wind index would go really
yeah,
high,
yeah.
with X class solar flares, those are the two extremes where I would see a difference.
Yes, when you combine the two, yeah, that's the combo deal right there. When you get a
Yeah,
big flare that just woof, kind of, it's almost like it grabs you by the ears and it rattles your cage for just a
yeah,
second.
for sure.
But if the solar wind, um, the corona mass ejections are the ones, that big blob of plasma, right? It takes a couple
Mhm.
days to get here, but it only lasts as long as that plasma blob is passing through our atmosphere. The coronal holes is that opening in the sun's atmosphere, which leaves a dark spot, and it just allows those solar winds, which are heavily
Mhm.
charged particles, to flow towards Earth, right? And if it's a big enough, like we've had huge corona mass ejection, or excuse me, huge coronal holes lately. I mean, almost the length of the sun. I've never seen it like this before. But that wind is flowing to Earth. It still takes about 2 days to get here, right? So the coronal hole can come around, and as it's rotating, the wind takes a while. But once there's a stream flowing, right, then it keeps flowing as long as that coronal hole is open. And then as the coronal hole floats away, or drifts away, pardon me, those winds will still kind of keep coming our direction, right? It's like you turn off a faucet that's a million years long, or flow. It's still going to flow for a little bit.
Mm.
And those winds are heavily charged particles. So those are the ones that I was saying will really, you'll feel these. They'll keep you up at
Mm.
night. They'll screw with your circadian rhythms. They'll bring up old injuries from the past, inflammation, and all of those things, but also some deep, deep repressed emotions that a lot of people have been having. And that's what I find myself working mostly on, is people calling me so I can show them different techniques and ways to work through these emotions. Because as a child, and I'll go back to our childhood programming, as a child, our brain was much smaller. We didn't have a frontal lobe, right? We didn't know how to handle these emotions, whether it was shame, anger, all of these different things. We couldn't process them. And that's why we tucked them down so deep. We shoved them in the closet, under the bed. We didn't want to hear anything more about it. And our mind forgot about it. That's the stuff that's breaking loose now and starting to come up. So, I mean, old epigenetic traumas,
Mm.
old life cycle traumas, they're coming to the surface right now. If you follow standard human protocol and reach for a coping mechanism, right? And just, a couple glasses of wine, a couple beers, whatever you reach for to just forget about those emotions, that's the worst thing you can do right now. Because, and for example, 30 years ago, when I'm helping people work through emotions, we had to work through this, right? Okay,
Mm.
a little bit of an interview, remember these things, don't go too Freudian, but allow them to come up. Right now, with the sun, it's like it's turning the key and these emotions are coming to the surface. And like I said earlier, people don't know what these are because you don't remember them, because you've forgotten them. So if you're reaching for a coping mechanism, oftentimes these emotions, they can't release. They go right back down into your soft tissue again, right? So what I've really been preaching is, dude, use this to your advantage. These emotions are coming up. We used to have to work on this. Now they're coming up on their own.
Right.
Just if you can learn to stabilize and breathe through them and release them properly, you can release so much childhood and adult trauma. It's kind of magic. Like within
Mhm.
6 months to a year, you're a radically different person because you've let it all go. You've let that shit go, right?
Yeah, I think it's an opportunity, you know, for growth
Yeah.
and development and alchemization. So I think
Well said.
like how can we um how can we just ignore something like this? You know, I saw a lot of feeds come up about scientists trying to say that this is not directly impacting the human organism when how is it not when the sun is made of plasma and our
Yes.
bodies are made of plasma? And
Yeah.
in reference to some of this too, is like the moon affects water, right? It affects the tides on this
Yeah.
planet. And we're made of 80% of water.
Yeah.
But throughout like the ages, like they said, oh, now we're 70, even 60% of water because we are collectively now becoming more dehydrated.
Yeah.
So because of lack of mineral intake and from the foods we ingest and things like that. But from that context, the old ways we used to say things were people who were crazy during a full moon were lunatics in reference to Luna, the
Yes.
moon. So why are we like we're just not coming back to old knowledge and understandings of these things? So if the moon is affecting water, right, in the system, and the sun is not, I mean, the sun creates the reflection of the light on the moon. So how can
Yeah.
we not? How can we just ignore that this plasma that affects the plasma within our system
Yeah.
and completely debunk this? And it to me that seems like misinformation. So
Well,
I think you
there.
do have an understanding
Sorry.
with plasma, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
if you don't mind breaking
and
that
I'd
down.
actually like to shift that just a little bit because plasma being the fourth phase of matter, right? That
Mm,
some people recognize, some don't. It's kind of funny. Water has four phases also. Science is really slow about adopting anything new. That's good, even if it's been scientifically proven that it's going to erase old theories, right? Because everything we learn is hypothesis, is theory, until a new theory or a new hypothesis changes that, but they still want to call it a truth.
mm.
Um, I'm gonna say we're still gonna work with the plasma, and I love the depth of your questions. Seriously, thank you. You've really thought this through, and I appreciate that. I'm gonna use the term frequency
Mm.
because at the core, right, everything is frequency,
Right.
everything. And that's something no one can deny. You know, you can talk five different theories of plasma, right? And whether blood is plasma and other things are plasma, but let's just go to frequency because the solar flares, the heavily charged particles, everything is frequency. We're frequency, okay? So we've got the sun, this enormous ball of burning plasma, and then we get this little Earth, right? And it's firing enormous flares at the Earth. Fortunately, the Earth is protected by an electromagnetic field, right? Otherwise, we would be cooked. So you've got the sun, you've got the little Earth down here, and it's rattling the Earth's electromagnetic field. So it's hard enough to imagine that. But now imagine how small you are in this scale of the sun and the Earth. You have an electromagnetic field around your body. It's rocking your electromagnetic field around your body. Now let's take it even deeper, and you can't wrap your head around it. Every cell in your body has an electromagnetic field, right?
Mm.
Every atom is an electromagnetic field. So you are being literally rattled to the core, not just at on the surface, but to the cellular level. And that's why it's releasing all these old emotions. It's bringing up, whether you believe in past lives or things like that, it's bringing up a lot of literally past life memories or epigenetic traumas and memories from people because it's really rattling our cage at the deep cellular level.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think what we're talking about is can be deemed esoteric knowledge because it's not validated by the scientific method, right? From which I
Yeah.
can see as a religion because it's a lot of dogmatic doctrine. So
Yes.
what we're talking about is this esoteric knowledge. But what
Yeah.
I've understood is like esoteric knowledge is like hidden truths along the lines of what we cannot perceive, right? And so with that, above esoteric knowledge is mesoteric knowledge, which is the idea that it deems duality and polarization as one. So
Yeah.
good and bad are one and the same. They are
Yeah.
contrasts with each other. They need each other to exist. So
Yeah.
with that mesoteric knowledge that we are all an encompassing whole, including our universe, including our sun, including this planet, including
Yes.
humanity, including our cellular structure. So what's happening is this entirety of the whole is shifting and at such a frequency of a wavelength that's elevating everything. And
Yeah.
if you're not meeting that elevation of frequency, that's where the turbulence comes. And so I
Yes.
do that internal work on myself. And so what I've noticed was when I was doing internal work on myself, whether it was childhood, whether it was old wounds, it was ramping up these things when X class solar flare would come, to where I was
Yeah.
having like even like this somatic emotional dysregulation where I was just
Yes.
coming into alignment to that frequency. So I'm really happy about how the fact you brought up the word frequency in reference to this, because essentially once I the way I see it is like, we set up these bars right for ourselves. And
Yeah.
so when we're at this lower bar, these solar flares set us up to this next bar that's now the foundation of what
Yes.
we're catapulting off in our
Yeah.
evolution of self, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, so many things to unpack there. I love this. Um, let's go back really quick to coping mechanisms,
Mm,
because a lot of these frequencies, right? It's rattling you all the way to your DNA. And so everything that's not compatible is basically breaking loose and coming to the surface. A lot of people that are ignoring this, because like I said, and you said, it's human nature to compartmentalize or ignore things, right? And they go right back down. Imagine you were a jar of water, a little pickle jar. And every time you had a traumatic event, you just put a tiny bit of dust in there. You didn't even see it going down the water. But over 20, 30, 40, 50 years, you now have this sediment at the
mm,
bottom, right? You didn't notice it when it was happening. Some of you did, but now you got all this sediment at the bottom. Well, working on these are all these traumas, epigenetic traumas, old suppressed emotions and repressed. But the sun, what it's done, instead of just working on a little bit at a time, it's pretty much turned the jar upside down and just rattled it. Right. So now everything is out in the open. And that's really
mm,
what's going on right now is people are like, oh my gosh, what are these feelings? What's going on? I don't even recognize any of this because someone has, and I say rattled your cage, but it's literally mixed up the entire jar. And you've got these emotions coming up. And I like how you phrased it. It's a beautiful opportunity to release these. Because if humanity is going to ascend, and I use that term loosely, which is just you can use that as a frequency term, right? Move into a higher frequency realm, we're not going to go from what people call 3D to 5D. You're just, it's not going to happen. Your body could not handle that. You
mm.
have to raise your frequencies very slowly to the next octave, right? And then you need to stabilize there, move to the next octave. And there's many octaves between dimensions. And that's what we're doing right now. We're slowly moving up. A lot of people are opening up their what you might call gifts, of knowledge, of seeing, of, ESP and ESPN. All of these things are coming to the surface. Um, and really the best thing you can do right now, and I'll now get physical, is disengage your stress response. Because when you have that cellular dissonance, it
Mm,
creates a stressor in your body. Because, right, you're not congruent. Your memories aren't congruent with these feelings that are coming to the surface. And it creates this dissonance. If this continues with our stress response that all of us, especially you guys in your line of work, deal with on a regular basis, it starts causing heart palpitations and all
mm,
these other symptoms. Well, as you know, right, you got the sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system, you got your fight or flight, but you've got your rest and digest. And the best thing, and I know you already know this, the best thing you guys can do is learn to breathe again. Inhale deeply from your nose to your belly, with nice long exhales. Inhale deep enough into your belly so that your belly comes out a little bit, because if it's coming out, we know it's also extending down, which is triggering your diaphragm, or extending your diaphragm, which is triggering the vagus nerve, which is in charge of 1,000 things in your system. But the coolest thing is it's there to disengage the stress response. Disengage it. And there's a reason why people take, if they stop and take 10 breaths, do it now if you're listening, inhale through your nose all the way to your belly like you're a little kid trying to act like they're pregnant, and a long exhale. And you'll notice within about 10 breaths, this calm comes over your body, because you're telling your system, I'm safe, I'm okay, I'm not being chased by a tiger, I'm all right. It's time to chill out. And when people go into that stress response, your blood travels to the exterior parts of your body, right? Because you're going to fight or flight. You're going to run, you're going to fight. You don't know what you're going to do. But we tend to, as humans, stay in this stress response. And there's a reason your digestive system is all screwed up, because the blood's not flowing there properly. It's out here waiting for a stress response. When you start to calm down, breathe, relax your central nervous system. That's the one thing everybody just needs to learn how to do, is breathe again. When we're a child and we go in to the doctor and the stethoscope, take some big breaths. We breathe from our chest and usually through our mouth, right? And we learn over the years to mouth breathe up here. When you breathe from your chest to your mouth, your body stays in a stress response. It's no different than the snake jumping out of the bushes. And you run, right? That's the stress response. You can't run from the tiger or jump from the snake if you're nice and relaxed and breathing deep. It'll bring your body back to homeostasis, and that's where humanity needs to work.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. That's very well put. And I think personal practice is an absolute anchor to have when these solar flares do come, right? You've now sunk your anchor in so deep that you're not so pushed by these things, right? And so when you ground yourself in with yourself, like at a metaphysical state, and use your practices, and they help you just kind of recalibrate the system, it really helps you engage with what's really happening, right? So you don't lose control. Essentially, right, with turbulence. Like turbulence, all it is just like an illusion of a loss of control when you're still going in the same direction. It's just the frequencies of causing the turbulence, right? And kind of what you were talking about too is I have a really good mentor of mine who explains some of these things in really simplistic terms. And what he explained to me is like we are the babies of the cosmos, essentially, right, on planet Earth. And so when a baby is crawling and it's learning to walk, all it sees is what's in front of its eyes, like the toys or the beginning of the coffee table. But once it learns to walk, it now can see the top of the coffee table, the couch, the door, the doorknob. And so it's not that these experiences were never here in the first place. It's the fact that we're now learning to walk and see things that were already in the room. So as we progress and we learn just through basic human connection, through basic emotional regulation, basic vagus nerve function, we're now being able to mature and grow and being able to actually use these things to our advantage. So the hardest thing I think people to understand is that there's poor guidance, poor education, because of the sickness that's been going on, the disease that's been going on this planet, which is just blinding people and meeting themselves with distraction, meeting themselves with just lies and deceit, because they want you to be in a state where you're being controlled and you're just being somewhat of a sheep, right? In this large flock. The whole point of this is to ignite yourself out of that, to say, hey, I'm powerful enough. I have the capabilities enough. I can transcend this epigenetic trauma. I can transcend these memories because I am powerful enough to do that. The thing I think that really huge pandemic that's really going on is the powerlessness that's been spreading. And once you realize how powerful you really are, you can move past all this shit. So the hard part for these firefighters is we already have a jacked up circadian rhythm. So we're already on the back burner. on that
I
basis.
know.
So if you're not taking into account how important your personal practice is, or how important regulating is, or how
Yeah.
important it is to embody yourself, it just becomes like you're just in survival mode. And I know I can speak from experience. I was in survival mode for a long time, a lifetime essentially, right? And to escape that is one of the most beautiful things I could ever have. And I hope people can just listen and understand, like, if you have to take responsibility for that as well, to do that for yourself. No one's going to do it for you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's the hard part, is that people just don't want to take responsibility. Just like 15 minutes a day, that's all you need. And I
Yeah.
think when we talk about things like this, it gives a little bit of validation for people to see, like, okay, I actually really need to do something that each day, whether it's breath work, whether it's drinking, structured water with electrolytes, right? If you can do those two things, that in itself
Yes.
will really help you. You know what I mean?
And you can make your own structured water at home, which is a beautiful thing. Um, oh my gosh! Once again, so much to unpack. I love that. You mentioned they, and they like you to, feel controlled and out of control at the same time.
Mm.
But really, the Romans, I think, said it best. They said, "Give them circus and bread, and they'll never revolt." And if you kind of look back in time, I've been on this planet for just 58 years now, so I've been here a minute, and it's been interesting to see how things have changed, and they've gotten busier and busier and busier and busier, and
Mm.
more distractions. The more they can keep you distracted, the less you're focused in here, right? The more
Right.
shiny objects you're chasing, the less you're focusing in here. And people just need to realize that you're the projector
Mm.
and this is the movie, right?
Mm.
And if you want to, you've probably heard the term, when you look at a mirror and it's not smiling back at you, you don't go up to the mirror and try and make it smile. You change this. And it's the
Mm.
same thing with your movie. You can't go out there and change that. That's already happening from the
Mm.
projector. You got to change this. You've got to stabilize this. And in your terms, bring the body back to homeostasis. And that's one of the most beautiful things, I think, when I do breath work and meditation classes, is I teach people how to slowly release these emotions, what's happening, right? But also how to regulate their system. And then we
Mm.
drop into a meditation. And it's beautiful because once you start to breathe properly and relax your body, and it can just be sitting in silence. You don't even have to use the M word, because meditation freaks people out. It's just sitting in silence. And people get really nervous when I tell them we're going to meditate. And I have to remind them, you understand, I'm asking you to do nothing. But human nature will make anything sound difficult that they're afraid of, right?
Mm.
And they kind of go, oh, I guess I am doing nothing. It's like, exactly. Humans need to practice 10 to 15 minutes a day of doing nothing and allowing your body will seek homeostasis if
Mm.
you allow it. But the programmers of the world, right, understand psychology, and they
Mm.
understand how to keep you distracted enough and in enough fear and thinking you need to be working 7 days a week and constantly active or watching and keeping up with The Simpsons, that it keeps you so just out of sync. It's the craziest thing in the world, when really you just need to stop and sit there for a minute, and your body will calm down.
Dude, that was so well put, Jason. I love how you mentioned that. I mean, even in by studying like Mahayana Buddhism, like they say meditation is just to sit. That's it. That's all it
Yeah,
is,
yeah,
right? And when you become the a beacon of sitting, that's when everything calms down, even in the body. Um,
yeah,
what's really fascinating? I know we talked about before we started recording, was we talked about the 5G a little bit. And
yeah.
there is a book that I had read called The Invisible Rainbow. I don't know if you've ever heard of that book.
I have heard of it. Yes.
Dude, so what this book talks about is essentially like when they started introducing radio frequencies on anything, right? So they were correlated with these really large epidemic or pandemics, even including the Black Plague or the Spanish
Yeah.
flu. So this been coordinated with time when a frequency is introduced that was, let's say, synthetic, right?
Yeah.
And so that had been affecting literally like the hive consciousness and even hive biology to increase
Yeah.
virus and bacterial responses within the system. Which, when 5G came on, what interaction did it have with humanity, right? So I love for you
Oh
to
my
talk about
gosh.
5G because it's just like
Yeah.
controversial, but at the same time, that's a really amazing book because it talks intricately about radio frequencies and the effect it has on the human organism.
Yeah. Yeah. And most of your viewers have seen a video somewhere on social media where they put the bass speaker, whether it was under a plate of sand or water, right? And you
Mm,
can see those frequencies happening. And it just kind of shows you how everything is frequency. And the 5G, ask anyone. It was supposed to give us 10 times better cell phone reception. How many of you out there even have 2 to 3 times better cell phone reception? So it's not really working the way they promised, is it? Otherwise, our cell phones would be magic right now because 5G is everywhere. But yet they can also show you human cells in a petri dish, and heavy frequency can literally start to disperse the cells and actually start to break up the DNA in a petri dish.
mm,
So if you can look at that from a scientific level, heavy frequency literally just what am I trying to say? Breaking up the DNA in a petri dish. That's what you're made of.
mm,
So it's right there. It's what it's doing to you. Now, the natural frequencies from the sun, these are just normal, kind of like a wave, a wave in the ocean, these natural waves, they flow with life. And that's how these frequencies, even though the X rays are pretty heavy, they're cleaning and clearing your body is what they're doing. They're literally putting you, they're what am I trying to say? They're detoxing you of all of these emotions and crap that's in your body. People are freaking out because they feel it. People aren't in a habit of feeling. People are in a habit of
mm.
compartmentalizing, reaching for a
Right.
coping mechanism, and avoiding the feelings. It's making you feel. That's normal. That's human. It's the part of the human that people avoid is feeling. And that's what most of the people that are calling me and working with me, they're really, and I need to make them understand, you're supposed to feel. You're a human being, right? And oh gosh, sorry, there was so much to unpack in that question. Um, it's getting back to homeostasis and understanding 5G. That's where you were. Man-made frequencies are at a set, hard frequency. They do not fluctuate and flow,
Mm,
right? They're not like the wind blowing in the fields at all.
right.
That's frequency too, right? It's hard frequency. Your cells aren't designed to receive that at all. There's a
Mm.
reason it breaks down the cellular structure in a petri dish because it's not natural. And it's been used well, and I'll only touch on this slightly, but they've been using frequency as a weapon
Mm.
for over 40 years now. So, and they know if they fire the right frequency into a crowd, they use it for crowd dispersement, dude. And I
Oh,
know
yeah.
I know you've heard of that in your
I've
industry.
seen that,
They
man.
can boom, they can blast a crowd, and all of a sudden everyone freaks out. That's frequency. That's man-made frequency. It can be used if it can be used as a weapon. It was not designed, especially these towers that are in our grade schools right next to the playground, that look like a fake tree. And it's all of those repeaters, all of those 5G frequency discs right there next to your children.
Yeah, dude, I totally agree. And I know, like, in my field of work, like, if I'm working on the paramedic ambulance that day, I'm going into hospitals, and hospitals have
Yeah.
so much, like,
Oh
just
yeah.
bad frequencies going through there. And I
Yeah.
know when I come home sometimes, like, dude, I just feel like I'm wrecked. My energetic
Yeah.
hygiene isn't really good, so I have to ground in so I can dump all that stuff and
Yeah.
kind of circulate better frequencies into my body. I even have a
Yeah.
grounding mat at work to kind of
Good.
just lay on that thing. I sleep on my grounding mat. And when
Nice.
I talk about these things at work, guys have no education on it. And I think I'm crazy for having like a grounding mat
Yeah.
when in the end, like we're just being bombarded by these man made frequencies. and we're getting energetically sick. And so we're becoming smaller and smaller and shrinking
Yeah.
our electromagnetic field. So like one of the biggest things I've done too is like jumping in the ocean after a long 72-hour shift or 120-hour shift, because
Yes.
it dumps out all those negative or terrible ions that were in my body, and I'm getting that replenishment from the ocean. So
Yeah.
like that's just one of my favorite things to do, and I feel refreshed. That's why most of the guys on our job who surf have the best positive attitudes, because they're
Yeah.
always in the ocean. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Crazy, right?
And I miss that from Maui. That's the one thing I miss the most, is getting barefoot on the beach and getting in the ocean. There's I don't know if there's anything better than that right there. You know, grounding is beautiful. And it's funny because when you were talking about going into a hospital, I tell people, if you've been in a hospital for an extended amount of time, immediately when you get home, get barefoot on the earth. If you have a natural body of water somewhere around you, you know, a lake, ocean, and if you can get in it, do it. And then the ocean, of course, you got those ancient minerals that are charging your body too. So you just get it from all angles. But that is so important, is to get back. One way I like to explain it, like you said, the gentleman you work with, your body is a battery. Every
Mm,
cell in your body is a battery, right? And when we
right.
stand on the earth in rubber shoes or on concrete, we're not connecting. We don't have a ground. Just like the plug in your wall that plugs in, it's not just the two plugs, right? It's also got a
Right.
ground right there. There's three plugs. And look at yourself like a battery. And the sun charges us, right? We get positive particles from the sun, negative electrons from the earth. It charges our batteries. And as soon as if you've ever seen someone get wired up, as soon as they step on the earth, you'll literally watch the body, just like a battery, upload in free electrons. Just like you're watching a battery charger charge, your body charges. It disperses all the static, it uploads free electrons. And once again, it's just science, you know. So maybe instead of taking the woo woo, get barefoot on the earth, dude, and ground, just tell them they're charging their batteries and they're getting electrons, no different than charging your battery. You're charging a regular battery, and you can wire it. You know, I've seen people do it. Wire them up, stand on the earth, and it just starts charging. It's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, firefighters we work with electricity. So that's
Yeah,
the way I would explain it to them as well. Like you have to have a ground in order for electricity to work. So what happens if
yeah,
you don't ground electricity? It short circuits. So if you have that circuitry constantly running, you're gonna blow a fuse, or you're gonna
yes.
pop a breaker, right? So that's when we shut down, right? And then we won't be misfiring things in our body on an electromagnetic a scale, right? So I think with understanding that, it's pretty simple, right? And
Yeah,
where did electricity come from? They came from the human intelligence. Like everything that comes from on this planet came from human intelligence, even computers. Like we're designed like these
yeah.
computers essentially, right? That's where they
Hmm.
got this intelligence from. And
Yeah,
so like we off put the intelligence of what the human body is capable of. Like even like now fascia has become a really important thing people are studying, because they're seeing like
absolutely.
fascia is this interwoven connected network, and that actually has its own electromagnetic frequency that is firing off signals from the nervous system to the muscles in the body, the way your organs are functioning, because it's wrapped around everything. It's wrapped around your
Yeah,
nervous system, your joints, your tendons. And if you disrupt that somehow and you have misfiring signals, then you have injury, then you have some type of disease, then you have some type of thing. So coming back to basics is huge. And I think with
yeah,
like grounding, like there was I don't know if you've seen that earthing documentary, but it was pretty rad how the guy who came up with this documentary and came up with grounding mats, he had his sister was really sick. And when she got really sick, I think she had hay fever or something like that. He was living next to a Native American reservation, and he took her to there because she was going to die. And going to a hospital would have been like hours away. So when he took her to the Native American reservation, they buried her up to her neck, and the next day
oh,
they took her out, and then she wasn't sick anymore. So like
that's
the earth
awesome.
has these really amazing healing qualities, because
Yeah,
have this exchange that we're unaware of or just poorly educated on. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, as I was saying earlier with the lighting, we're inside the majority of our lives now. We were designed to be outside, moving, grounding, right? Grounding, getting sunlight, getting the frequencies in our eyes that naturally programs us to have, more energy middle of the day, produce melatonin in the evening. Your body is designed to follow these rhythms. And we are just so, not only do we sit under artificial light all day, that totally tunes us in a different frequency. We wear rubber shoes. You wear rubber gloves when we work electricity, right? So you don't get shocked. We cannot connect to the earth to charge. We drive in a car with rubber tires. We stand on concrete. I've asked you, and I'm sure you have too. You ask people all the time, "When's the last time you actually got barefoot and stood in your yard?" And they're like, "Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, never. It's gross." And it's like, "Oh my gosh, just we're so disconnected from this earth that we exist on."
And a
It
lot of people
blows
have
my
turf
mind.
too. They gotten rid of their
Yeah,
actual and organic grass and have turf now. And what's in turf? A
good
bunch of
point.
rubber. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Now, so
exactly.
even
Yeah,
more disconnected. They can't even ground in their backyard.
yeah, yeah,
So you mentioned before you kind of slipped it in was the Schumann resonance.
yeah,
And I know you would know more about this than I would, but I know the Schumann resonance does have its correlation to what's happening with solar activity
yeah.
and in reference to frequency and all those things as well. Because that has been a kind of like booming where people are like have their Instagram accounts and they're talking about, oh my God, the Schumann resonance and all this
Yeah,
stuff. But I think there's a little bit more to the Schumann resonance than just what people are trying to get more likes and views on their Instagram accounts so people buy their shit. Right. So
exactly. Thank
let's
you.
get to the basics of what the Schumann resonance is and its correlation to what's actually happening in this thread and what we're talking about.
Yeah. Well, the Schumann, and I forget back when Schumann actually discovered this, it's just the resonance of the earth, right? And I think it's 7.8 megahertz. But science will tell you the Schumann resonance is set and affected by the amount of lightning in our ionosphere. And that's really what charges it and keeps it going. And so I'll stick with that for a minute. Sure, that is. And it does affect it. When there's huge storms in different areas, it affects the frequency of the earth. And that makes complete sense. But when you start to back up and look at, we've been talking about how everything is connected, right? Large solar flares, how ironic that there was a small spike in Schumann resonance, right? No difference in the storms on Earth. So there is an effect. It's going to take science a while because, like I said, for them to accept any new theories, it debunks some of the old ones. And I won't get into that, but you know where I'm going. It takes a while for new theories to come in, even if they can see that there are effects in the Schumann resonance when there's major solar activity. At the same time, we're the little ants living on the earth, right? And so we were just talking about grounding. Of course, we're made of frequency. We're going to respond to the earth's frequency. It's our mother. We live on it. If the frequency of the earth changes, it's going to come right through our body and it's going to change us and our frequency. And we respond differently to different frequencies. So we feel this. There's been a lot of spikes in the Schumann resonance. But what's interesting is, yes, Schumann resonance affects community or humans, but it's the other way around also. Humans affect the Earth's frequency. Okay. So community consciousness or global consciousness, or like you said, the hive mentality, that global consciousness responds to Schumann. But what people are forgetting is Schumann or the Earth's frequency also responds to human consciousness.
Interesting.
And recently, with all of these huge governmental distractions with weather manipulation, floods, tornadoes, storms, all these things going on, that we know, well, most of us understand are radical distractions because there's more going on behind the scenes. That's going to affect community consciousness, which is also going to affect the Schumann. So it's a give and take.
Interesting. I've noticed the way I've been following the space weather report
Yeah.
with the whether it's the solar winds, whether it's a coronal mass ejection. I've seen there's a break of time that the Schumann actually has a spike in energy that's coming
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of misinformation how people interpret this. So I love how you broke that down. It's really fascinating that the fact that we we actually are part of this experience with how the Schumann is activating, right? And the way I
Yeah.
understood the Schumann resonance is that it's the natural pulsations of the earth. It's like the earth's heartbeat per se.
Yeah.
And so when it's beating and it's continuing, and we're linked in and anchored onto this planet, right? We are
Yeah.
somewhat beacons of electromagnetic frequencies that are resonating onto the earth. The earth feels what we're feeling, like we're not
Yeah.
separate from this. And that
Exactly.
kind of comes from like our separation and believing that we're separate from the earth and our relationship to it. Instead of honoring it like these indigenous cultures would, they would honor the earth and
Yeah.
would treat it with utmost respect. And I think that's one of the things too that's causing a lot of dissonance is the fact that we don't respect the earth in a sense where we find it to be in relation to us. And
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So I'm really glad you brought that up, and the fact that our global consciousness is activating what this is.
Yeah. And it goes both ways. We're all
Right.
connected. The science, we've mentioned science a lot, and I'll just really quick, it fascinates me how science used to be ruled by religion, right? And
Mm,
if you thought, that everything didn't revolve around the earth and you came out with a new theory, you were told to recant it or be burned at the stake. It was pretty serious stuff, right? The church ran their science pretty hardcore. And a lot of the scientists at the time could not bring out new theories or they would be put to death. What's
mm,
interesting is when church and science, well, the religion had such a strong dogma, right?
mm,
That you could not defy it. Okay, so check this out. When science separated from religion, science didn't say, hey, let's figure this out from a natural level. It labeled, categorized everything, and separated itself from spirit. So
mm,
if you look at science, it developed a dogma just as hardcore as they were being punished by. They
mm.
didn't set out to say, hey, let's figure this out. They said, well, screw religion, screw science. All right, excuse me, spirit, we're being just science. So now science, the dogma is just as radical as
Yeah.
religion was back then when the truth is in the middle, man. It's right there. It's in the
Yeah, I
middle.
agree.
And that's one of the challenges with it. I like to quote science, but it's also very limited because, you know, I mean, they've proven the fourth phase of water, but science still won't pick up on it.
Yeah, what's crazy is yesterday I was at work and I was just sitting there and looking at all the lists of hospitals, and I would say 80 to 90% of the hospital listings are all these Roman Catholic like
Yeah,
groups that have created these really large hospitals that are like supposed to be like world renowned or nation renowned
yeah,
hospitals where they specialize in things. I was like, well, why did the Roman Catholic Church instill this into the medical system? It seems to be really strange when they might make it seem like it's humanitarian for them to help sick people, when I'm assuming there's some type of agenda going on here to create a system that keeps people sick.
yeah,
This was just like my own thing that I had like
yeah,
yesterday, and I was like just watching that happen. I was like, dude, what a great thing to see. But it's only because I saw the list of hospitals. It was like,
yeah,
Providence of this, St. John's that. It was kind of interesting to see that, but I'm glad you brought that up because I try to be the best I can neutral with this,
yeah,
understanding like how the systems are designed for a reason to keep minimal ways of thinking outside the box.
yeah,
And I hope people can like start to awaken to thinking outside the box now, especially with things like solar flares, with things like the Schumann resonance, with things like basic
yeah,
practices. You know what I mean? So I know
yeah,
you're teaching people all this stuff on how to get back to the basics when we have to have a foundation in which we build off of. If we
yeah,
don't have a foundation with this and we don't have the proper education, how are we supposed to survive with bliss? How are we supposed to live a
yeah.
true full life? You know what I mean?
Well, there's a reason when people go on vacation and they go out to the country or the mountains, and all of a sudden they feel totally relaxed and they don't want to come back to the city. And it's not just because you're not at work, you're back to frequency. We entrain with nature, right? And I do that sometimes with my clients, right? I can raise my frequency, and when I work closely with a client, I can help raise their frequency a little bit. Not by doing anything crazy, but just by being near them. You know, entrainment, you start a clock shop and you have 100 grandfather clocks that are ticking, right? They're all moving in different directions, but the
Mm.
strongest one, after a week, they'll all start following that
No shit.
strongest clock.
I didn't know that.
So energy will entrain to energy. So when
Mm.
we're here just being distracted mentally, we don't even know it, but we got 5G, we've got all these other frequencies, we've got the neighbors next door that are fighting, we've got, it doesn't matter. There's so much going on, and we're not even grounding because we're on a concrete base, right? So we can't charge our batteries. It's totally erratic. But hey, we turn off our phone. You take any person on this earth, if they don't freak out when you turn off their phone, but if you can turn off their phone, put them in nature for a day, they will completely relax, right? Their blood pressure will start to stabilize, just like being buried in the earth, right? Your body will naturally seek that homeostasis, and it will entrain to the energy of nature because that's what you are. You're a spirit in a meat suit. You're made out of nature, but we're separate from it.
I love the way you put that, and I think it's the really the separateness that makes us
Yeah.
really sick. It brings us into a state of disease and dysfunction.
Yeah.
Because when you disjoint the spirit aspect from who we are, then we're losing a big huge part on what we're seeing ourselves as. You
Yeah.
know, and like it's hard to like mitigate like what the spirit is to someone because they're going to correlate the spirit with religion always, right?
Yeah.
And I always
Yeah.
try to just tell people that's not what it is. You know, the
It's
spirit within
not.
you is like is a part of you that is just giving you access to many other things. And
Yeah.
in my reference to like what the fifth element would be the etheric realm or the ether,
Nice.
because it's like this grid that carries information, and your
Yeah.
spirit is always in connection with that grid. But if you've disconnected yourself to what that is, you're unable to receive the greater gifts you're designed to have. And so,
Yes.
like, if we're accessing now the etheric field, it's just like accessing the internet. Where the hell does the internet come from? It's not any different from what we're experiencing from the ether. So as you start to enable yourself to advance into just like basic practices, you start to realize you're able to access information outside of yourself that's actually been there all the time, just like how the toddler's learning how to walk, right?
Yes.
And so what we're
Yes.
doing here is we're seeing that this technology is here already and we can access it. But if we just blind ourselves and you don't want to see it, and because it challenges our beliefs, it challenges our programmings, that's when we
Yeah.
came here to unravel. And so give yourself the greater awareness of curiosity to start with, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's one of the biggest things, to just be open minded to curiosity in itself, because curiosity leads to imagination. It leads to like the core of who we are. Because
Yes.
when you talk to a child, like it's seriously like they're my Zen masters. You know what I mean? Like they speak with just full life.
Yeah.
And we grow up as adults and like we forgot all that for some reason. It's because of, you know, just what we've been raised with, and
Yeah.
we didn't know any better. You know, it's just ignorance. And like one of my friends tells me that ignorance is where suffering comes from.
Yeah. Pretty much. Not only do the children speak freely, they laugh from their belly, man. When's
uh
the last time you just had a belly laugh so loud that you just almost got a stomach ache? And that's it. That's nature. And I love how you said that. Those are our little Zen teachers right there. My children, when I had started creating offspring, those were my best teachers. And it was magic. And really, my whole goal is to help people find balance, right? But like you just said in a different way, to remind them they are the technology.
mm,
You are the technology. You hear about these people that can read spirit, do this, the telekinesis, all these different things, and we're so mystified by it because
mm,
we've dismissed the fact that all of us have that. I was speaking to a group of about 200 people, I don't know, 6 months ago, and I started kind of telling them my story, right? I could see energy, and fortunately I had a mom that was curious about that, and she said, wow, this is cool, let's dive a little deeper, and she accepted it. And so I was able to develop those skills of seeing and connecting with frequency. But I asked the audience, I said, how many of you had a whisper in your ear as a kid, or would see things or have visions, right? But when you talk to your parents about it, they said, oh my gosh, that's weird, don't talk about that at the dinner table, right? And you shut it down. Over half the audience raised their hands. And then I said, okay, leave your hands up. you know how many of you not only had that experience, but how many had the parents that shut it down? And then you as a kid shut it down, the hand stayed up. And it shows me again and again and again, we're all born with this, we're all born connected,
Mm.
but all of a sudden we get completely distracted. And of course, those that run the planet are masters of distractions,
Mm.
and the more they can keep you distracted and doing what's trending, yeah, the further you are from yourself. You forget you're the technology. Once you start to realize you are and how magic you are, it starts to blossom, and it's freaking magic.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Jason. As far as time goes, where are we at with time? Are you good still, or are we gonna have to close up pretty soon here?
No, I'm good. I've got another 15 minutes.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, I'd love to just kind of express. I mean, from my own personal experience, I grew up extremely sensitive. I knew I was extremely
Yeah.
sensitive and perceptive to energies, and even my mom would tell me, like, as a baby, I would cry, and she couldn't get me to stop crying. And we were living in this one apartment complex, and when we had left that apartment complex, I just always cried in that place. And what
Yeah.
she had found out was that the next door to where we were living, a woman was murdered in there, and she had just figured it out.
Wow.
So I was reading, even as a toddler or a baby, that I kept crying because I kept reading in this frequency that was
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And she validated it with my crying. She was like, hey, he understood that, but as I got older, my sensitivities, I actually numbed them with alcohol because I
Yeah.
didn't know or how to adjust or use them to my advantage. So luckily I got older and I found practices and understood Taoist breathing techniques, and I worked with mentors who taught me
Nice.
how to channel these gifts that I naturally had, since birth. And I think that's the thing, kind of going back to, is just that the poor education on it is one thing, and the ignorance that's involved with it.
Yeah.
But I think in reference to the totality of what we're talking about here is, um, we are part of connection, and so we have to move through community. And so as we're moving
Yeah.
forward with this, luckily we have podcasts, for good information to come out and have people see, like, check in with themselves, like, hey, did this information resonate with me, or is this a bunch of bullshit? And I think
Yeah.
right now is we're moving into kind of like a bifurcation of what that's coming out with, because there is a lot of bullshit out on the internet right now. I would totally
Yeah.
agree with you. So when you're listening to something like this, check in with yourself and see, hey, does this seem somewhat true? And sit
Yeah.
quietly with yourself, maybe like 3 minutes, and say, yeah, this does kind of resonate to me because I have been experiencing this, and I know you have experienced people having these symptoms on a global scale. So I'd love to
Yeah.
close with you talking about the global symptoms that people are experiencing that you're correlating from all over the place.
Yeah. Well, and we mentioned it earlier before the podcast. Having a global audience has been fascinating because you always wonder, right? Is it just the water in Utah? What's going on here? But when people start reaching out from South America, after we had a huge X-class flare last night, and Ireland, Australia, New Zealand, all these other places with really similar symptoms at the same
Mm.
time following these events, it's been beautiful to kind of quantify that data, right? Of, okay, this just happened, and it's not just me. There's people from around the globe feeling the same thing, and it's been fascinating. And this solar max has really allowed me to reporting on it daily. Like I said, I just used to do when there was an X class flare every now and then, but when this fired up, I've been reporting on it literally almost daily since late 23. No one was talking about the sun back then,
Right.
but it's trending now. So you've got a lot of people, like you mentioned earlier with the Schumann and some other things. Trending on social media means how many people can I distract to get them to buy my crap? And really,
Right.
that's all it is, and it's social media, human consciousness, human attention spans have gone. We used to be able to tell a 2 or 3 minute joke. And now if you don't get it done in 5 seconds, it's over, right? Because
Right.
no one can
Mhm.
really focus for that long. And everyone out there on social media is saying, hook their attention, hook their attention. Well,
Right.
something scary, something fearful, something like that. And that's really where community consciousness is so erratic right now, is they're so busy following what's trending, tracking this, that, they're just fish following the lure, man.
Mhm.
And it's fascinating to watch this. The entities that run this planet are psychological masters of distractions, you know,
Mhm.
and, big explosion over here, pass that bill. And just to watch this happen on a regular basis, like I said, like I've been on this planet for a minute, um, to watch human attention span shorten while there's so much going on behind the scenes. And it's also distracting us from this, from the technology, from you. And that's where, there's no out there. You need to focus in here. When you heal this, everything out there changes. You don't have to change it.
Mhm.
It automatically changes because you're the projector. Change the projector, the movie changes. But we've been taught to try and change the movie screen. That's why we're all going crazy trying to make change.
Yeah, I mean, William Shakespeare said that all the world's a stage, men and women merely players. So
Yes.
how did he know this stuff back then, man? Like it was crazy. And I think like what you're saying too, I like to reference it as weapons of mass distraction
Yeah.
because and you had even referenced the Roman days, right? And because Rome was crumbled upon the people destroyed Rome and Caesar just took over, right? So
Hmm.
there was like this theory that, you give them bread, give them a circus, and that's how you destroy things, right? Like it's just this distraction state. But
Yeah.
we have to awaken to that. Like history is going to repeat itself, and
Yeah.
it's gonna constantly not evolve unless we figure it out. So it does take
Yeah.
conversations like this, right, for people to get the point. And dude, I'm still guilty of it. Like I get distracted and stuff like that. And I use my phone to disassociate. But the thing is I'm aware of it. You know what I mean? So having the awareness, like, hey, I caught myself right here. I got stuck in a doom
Yeah.
scroll for an hour because I don't want to deal with work right now. You know what I
and
mean?
and you're willing to admit it. I'm distracting myself, exactly. And
Right.
it's, they're all coping mechanisms in their own way. And just to rephrase what you were just saying, it's like, don't get stuck in the past, but those who don't study their history are doomed to repeat it. And it's just watching this cycle over and over again of master distraction. Light a fire over here, do something over there when no one's looking. And yeah, it's fascinating watching the world. It's just one big movie with lots of commercials.
Totally, man. Well, I'd definitely like to close, dude. Jason, you're so wonderful to talk to, and thank you for being the first
Thank you.
remote episode on the Grab Lives podcast. Everyone, please follow Jason on Instagram. He's amazing to watch, and just like education wise on what these solar flares are doing. Give him a follow. And dude, Jason, thank you so much, brother, for just like connecting with me and taking your
Thank you.
time. I really appreciate it. It's rad to just connect with you, brother.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And yeah, Instagram's just my first and last name, Jason Latas. My website, Jason Latas. Find me, reach out, and yeah, let's make this world a little bit smaller and help each other heal.
Yeah, so we're gonna post on the episode description. We'll have all of Jason's all of
Oh,
his
nice.
connections on there. So we'll make sure that people can access you and the things you offer. And what other things do you offer if you don't mind expressing that?
The one thing, the big download I had about 2 years ago was finally creating an easier way to help people from a distance. And I
Mm,
created an 8.5 hour video series. And it's funny because I was going to mention earlier, it starts with childhood programming.
mm,
We've talked about that off and on through the whole podcast. And then it just goes through programming. What is it? How to tap into your own energy field, how to see energy. It's not hard. We all can see it, right? It's relaxing into it. It's got, oh my gosh, sun gazing, all of that, the central nervous system, everything we've talked about. And it's just a series that you can watch at home on your own. And then we can connect because we're speaking the same language and we can really
mm.
take a deep dive. And it's worked out really well for me.
Nice, man. Well, thank you so much for your service to humanity, number one, and then just your knowledge and wisdom. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And the same for you. I appreciate the way you phrased everything. And yeah, this has been a beautiful hour. I appreciate it. Really appreciate connecting with you. Thank you for having me.
No problem. All right, everyone. If you just like and subscribe, Grab Lives podcast. If you can try and do the best you can to be more active on the Instagram page, we've definitely seen like the algorithm kind of shift where we're kind of on the back feed of everything because of the things we talk about.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you do help that on Instagram, please interact with Grab Lives and so forth. So thank you everyone for listening. Thank you, Jason, and take care. I love you.
Hey, thank you so much. Love you too, brother. Talk to you soon.
It's time for Crab Lives.